Hello, everyone. I'm Carter Foster. I'm Deputy Director for Curatorial Affairs at the Blanton Museum of Art. Thank you for joining us. We're here for our curated conversation with Terry Allen. And his exhibition, Memoirs, is on view at the Blanton until July 10th. Welcome, Terry. Say hi.
Hi, Carter.
Hi. So I'm going to just give a few housekeeping notes to begin. Your audio is muted, so no one can hear you, and only the panelists are visible on screen. You can enable closed captioning by clicking live transcript, the icon at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking questions in the Q&A window, not in the chat. So if you want to leave comments in the chat, that's fine, but please put your questions in the Q&A window. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And we're also being recorded, and this will be available on our YouTube channel in about a week. So I'm going to give an introduction to someone who I don't think needs much of an introduction to people in Austin, so I'll be brief. But Terry Allen is a visual artist, musician, and works in many genres. He was born in Wichita, Kansas, and grew up in Lubbock, Texas. And Texas iconography features prominently in his work, I would say. He received a BFA from the Chenard Art Institute in 1966. He's exhibited widely across the country and internationally. He's shown for many years with the LA Louvre Gallery in Los Angeles, where he's had a number of solo exhibitions. And I want to thank Kimberly and her team there for helping us with the exhibition and for promoting this talk. Terry has put out numerous studio albums, and two of them have just been reissued with Terry Allen and his band, the Panhandle Mystery Band, and that's Smoking the Dummy from 1981 and Bloodlines from 1983. Is that right, Terry? They're just
That's right.
Yeah, good. Okay. He's received grants from places like the Guggenheim and the NEA. He's in many museum collections, such as the Blanton, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, among others. He's well known for two albums in particular, 1975's Juarez and 1979's Lubbock on Everything, which are considered pioneering concept albums and pioneering albums in the alt country genre. He recently did a show at the Paramount Theater in Austin. His recent performance on Austin City Limits can be viewed on anywhere you have access to PBS. I encourage you to watch them. He frequently collaborates with his wife, Jo Harvey, and they will celebrate their 60th anniversary this summer. So thanks, Terry. And I guess I'll start with, it's great to see you. I guess I'll start with the slide, the image of the lighthouse that was on the intro slide, because you wanted to talk about that. And that's in fact related to how we met. It's called Song for Kippy. So I don't know if you want to talk about that image and who Kippy Stroud was.
Really just for that reason. That was kind of, we met at that incredible place called Kippy Camp. Kippy Stroud had many years, and invited a lot of artists and curators and musicians and people in all the arts, I think, except she kind of shied away from the commercial aspects and didn't have many dealers.
Yes.
But she passed away several years ago, and there's a couple of pieces that are kind of songs for. One for Mary Oliver, the poet who passed not too long ago. But this one was just called Song for Kippy, and it's because her place was up in Maine, and that's where we all traveled to for many years. Jo Harvey, I think, went there, and the kids about 17 years. And the lighthouses kind of figured prominently in that part of the world, and so that Song for Kippy is just a lighthouse on fire. Yeah. That kind of a beacon.
She was indeed an amazing woman, and the way she brought people together was really special, and people across all genres of art and writers, and not just visual artists, but and
her generosity was just stunning, because she would invite all the people she invited, and sometimes there would be maybe a couple of hundred people during the course of the summer, and she would give them lodging, a place to work, and the only thing you really had to do, and even that, if you didn't want to do it, you didn't have to, but was to give about a 30-minute talk about something you're working on. And so it was like getting a grant in a way for the whole family, and it provided a situation, I think, for a lot of people who couldn't have afforded it otherwise to bring their family on vacation, because it was very beautiful, Mount Desert Island in Maine.
And she created opportunities that I think are invisible in a way, because people don't know. But you were having this show at the Blantons because we met at her. Probably, yeah. I may have met you otherwise because we have friends in common. But that's the first time I saw you perform with your family, and so it's really
the first
special.
time I think you saw drawings that I did.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and start with some images. If I can make this work, I hope I can. Is that working? I hope people can see that.
Interlude, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I would start with this drawing because it really helped me understand your concept for this exhibition. And when we first started talking about your show here, and I should say that the show it divides our contemporary project space in two halves. One half is drawings, and one half is a video installation, which lasts about 120 minutes, which we'll talk about in a minute. But when we first started talking about the exhibition, you told me about this Italian theater genre called Sintesi.
Right.
And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that. I remember you said they're like little stabs of memory, which is a phrase I love.
Well, it was during the Futurism in Italy in the 20s. It was kind of a prominent form of expression of theater. And they were just little short plays. I mean, really short plays, like maybe a minute, maybe 30 seconds, where some very elaborate incident would happen. Curtains would open, and that would happen, then curtains would close. And usually very absurdist, like somebody might be just drag a dog, an elaborate set, and drag a dog across the stage and curtains close, that's it. So from, first time I kind of encountered that, I was very intrigued. It reminded me a lot too of the Dadaists and what came a little bit later. So I always wanted to do a piece, and have probably done several, called Futurism in Reverse. And that's basically just taking that same kind of idea and applying it to my own ideas sorry. And this is one of the early ones, actually. And it's this Julie Stein is the songwriter. The song is Three Coins in a Fountain, and it's written in Italian. And there's a story of it's a little boat with an accordion player dressed in a skeleton suit out on turbulent seas, and suddenly a space capsule comes in. That's it. So it kind of doesn't come from anywhere, and it kind of doesn't go anywhere, and that's what I like most about it.
I liked it so much because it really is like a theater script. It is like a script for a Sintesi, and it could also work really well as a short film, I feel like, because you give like lighting cues, and you say what's going on. You say sung softly by a woman. It's very specific in that way.
Yeah, I think in a way that's like what happens with a song. A song is kind of like a little play or a little theater piece or a little movie. And a lot of that stuff's implied, what the light might be like, what the climate might be like. So on a drawing, I just basically kind of describe some of that, but it is like a script, and in a way they're all like scripts, even though they're not necessarily written out. They're kind of visual scripts, and that's kind of, I think, a consistent thread that goes through the whole show as far as the drawings.
Right, and I love this drawing too because it mixes both the printed text, which features prominently in your show. A lot of the drawings have pretty extensive, for one sheet of paper, printed text, which tells narrative story in many cases. this one combines that with your, I assume you wrote that yourself, the handwriting, and
Yeah.
and then your own drawing, and so it mixes all these things together so wonderfully. So speaking of songs, I think I'll go up to, I'll maybe talk about, so since this 3-channel video piece takes up half the show and is quite, it's pretty long, and so I encourage anybody who's a fan of yours should really go and sit through the entire thing. How did you get the concept for this piece? Because it features songs that you've written, many of your famous songs that you've recorded over the years.
I started thinking about that incredible mystery of where a song comes from. And sometimes I think you think it's very obvious that, that some incident or something that, that happened or that you're specifically writing toward or something. But inevitably, to me, it's all very mysterious where music comes from, where any of this comes from, really. So I set up a series of stories, just wrote a series of stories kind of over a period of time, and kind of thinking what song they might lead into, what song they might have generated possibly, or part of the song. And that's what that video is really about. It's kind of a dialogue between Jo Harvey and I, which is really more of it's just kind of monologues with each of us listening to each other. And we tell these stories about things that in some cases are made up, but in most cases they're not. They're kind of autobiographical stories that lead to when at the end of the story, the song plays. And it's basically that simple. It's kind of just floating through the idea of where that kind of image and that kind of melody might have come from. And then it happens in front of a green screen, which with images put behind or in front of me, actually, as far as the camera goes. And I wanted all of the images, I wanted to be facing those images with my back to the audience, because it always seems like it's being left behind. Those stories are told and then you're being left behind. So this, I think, is from Amarillo Highway.
Yeah, I believe it's how did you pick the images that would go with the songs? Did you?
Well, that is Amarillo Highway.
That's good.
So it's. I know you thought it was much more beautiful than that, Carter,
I don't know that I've ever been on it.
but that's it. Yeah, you should do yourself a favor probably and never get on it.
Well, so let's talk about a lot of your songs are from your own autobiography, and I remember when I was writing the label for the text for the show, the intro text, I asked about using the word autobiographical, and you said, "Well, put it in quotes," which I thought was very funny.
Yeah.
Which also relates to the title of the show, Memoirs, because memories are always, we can remember what happened to us in our youth, but it's probably not what really happened, and it's filtered through our own current lives. So maybe
and it's Memoirs, WARS, because I think there is a kind of constant collision between you might have one memory, but that memory is so different the first time it happens and maybe 10 years down the line. So memory is always in a state of flux, and I think they're always in a kind of weird conflict with one another, a lot of them. So that was part of the wars, but also some of the stories deal directly with war, with the Vietnam War and World War II, et cetera. So it seemed like an appropriate kind of pun to put there as a title. But what I was going to say about Amarillo Highway, it's like the song and the image are fairly kind of obvious as far as what's going on with it. But the story that leads up to it is about when I was a child in Lubbock, going up pretty much at least once or twice a month to my aunt's house in Amarillo and having a Sunday dinner. And after the dinner, my uncle, who was a barber there, had somehow got all of these plans, these floor plans to local banks. And they cleared the table and set these floor plans out. And all of my relatives would all of the male relatives would kind of circle around these plans and make a, figure out how they could rob them, make a bank robbery. And I remember that was kind of their game, like Monopoly or whatever, from the time I was a kid, And so that kind of triggered to me, would be appropriate to put Amarillo Highway on there too.
So that answers, I think, somebody asked about the Amarillo Highway and your relationship with Dave Hickey too, because the song is dedicated to the great writer Dave Hickey, who passed away recently.
Yeah, well, Dave and I met on Idlew Road, actually, during a big sandstorm. And when I first met Dave, he came to, he was curating some show in South Texas called Sweet South Texas Funk, I think. But I noticed he had a guitar in the back seat of his car, and asked him to bring it in, and we started singing songs. And we never talked about art at all. That was my first encounter with Dave. And then he wrote a piece in Art in America a year or so later about land earthworks, I think. And he used the Amarillo Highway lyrics from my song, not Amarillo Highway, but Truckload of Art on it. But he mentioned, when he kind of wrote where he heard the song, he mentioned it was on Amarillo Highway. And as a joke, really, I said he didn't know the difference between Idlew Road and Amarillo Highway. And that's why it was dedicated to me. It wasn't anything more than just that lame idea, But it stuck,
I wanted to ask you about the sort of the interconnectedness of the different genres you work in. Something that I've noticed in my career as a curator is that a lot of visual artists, or people who are primarily visual artists, have a deep connection to music. They may be serious musicians that play, but music's really important to them and for inspiration. And similarly, a lot of serious musicians also do visual art in a serious way. David Byrne has a show of drawings up in New York right now, I believe. Patti Smith makes visual art. Bob Dylan paints, Joni Mitchell paints. But I don't know, I think for you, it's a little more on an equal level, everything, or I feel like you're equally accomplished in all those genres, and they all mix together. They're all the same thing for you. I mean, you said that, and I just wondered.
Yeah, very much. I think all those people really you mentioned are kind of people that came up out of the '60s.
Yeah,
and I think that's one thing about the '60s that all of those kind of isms started collapsing, and but also the war was huge, because the music that came out of that war, either protest-wise or whatever, was some of the most volatile forms of expression going on. And I think everyone was affected by that. The idea that you had people listening, anti-war people listening to the same songs that people that were fighting the war were listening to. So it was like I said, a volatile kind of time as far as expression. And I think that, combined with the fact that all of those labels were kind of falling apart, for me, made it, it seemed like one thing. And it never did. Writing a song, making a drawing, performing an action, it all seemed to be one thing, and one could move to the other as, easily.
And you've done many installation type pieces, which are, immersive, that you walk in, that feature moving image, video, sound, theatrical elements, which is an example of that,
Yeah, well, it's when you have to be there.
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen again. Since you mentioned the war, there's a particular drawing I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
and it's related to the war. And it's, I can do this. This drawing, Roadrunner. Yeah. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, that story that's on top of the drawing is it's about a friend of mine that was in our wedding that I guess it was 1967 was killed in Vietnam, and I remember the night of my wedding, there were about 5 of us that went out to the lake and were drinking beer and talking about, it was very melancholy because everybody was going to be leaving different directions. And Jo Harvey and I were headed for California as soon as we got married. And so we knew we probably wouldn't see each other for a long time, if ever. And I remember getting several calls from, his name was Stanley, and he ran track in, he was from Hobbs, New Mexico, and he ran track, but he would come to Lubbock a lot. We'd go to Hobbs a lot, but we were good friends. And the last time I talked to him, he had called and said that he had been to Juarez and had a Roadrunner tattoo on the back of each calf of his leg, and later I found out after he had been killed that was the only way that they could identify him. I guess he stepped on a mine, landmine or something, and that was, I believe, 1967 that happened. So that's really it's that story kind of written on top of that bleep image, Roadrunner. And it led to a song called Blue Asian Reds, which is really came from thinking about a girlfriend of his that he had, it kind of got into the feelings about him through those feelings of hers, which was, finding out about him dying and her sense of loss with that. So there's several stories that are kind of happening there that are leading up to this song, and the song kind of throws me back anyway into some of those ideas. Things that
when you get inspiration to write a song, often from your own memory, your personal experience, I mean, do you tend to write them quickly and do the words just sort of come, or do you labor over them a lot? Or
there's no way that it happens, no specific way to me. It's happened. Sometimes a song will come in 1 minute. Other times it'll be 10 years. Sometimes you think you're working on, 3 songs, and you realize at some point you're only working on 1, or vice versa. You can be working on 1 and realize it should be 2. I've written a lot of songs in cars. Because of that motion, I think probably 3/4 of the songs that I've written have been started in a car or written in a car. So it's that movement through space, and then also the monotony, I think, of the rhythm of tires on the road. So, and I don't think that's particularly uncommon. There's a lot of musicians, I think, that have written. Boredom is the mother.
Yeah.
Whatever. What's that quote?
Boredom is the mother of invention.
Yeah, it's the mother.
Necessity is the mother of invention, but boredom.
Boredom is the mother of invention.
Yeah. And so, if you write in a car, are you writing in your head and then you remember it and you go down later and put it down to music?
Yeah, I just do it over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And usually somehow a tune kind of melody comes in, and I just kind of repeat it. And that's part of the rhythm of it, I think. Also, I have like drawers full of scraps of paper, envelopes, backs of matchbooks, whatever, that, you write a lyric or you write just a combination of words down. And so there's no real process to me as far as that goes. I did a soundtrack, and that was one of the hardest things I ever did, because it was adapting my music to somebody else's vision. And I had a difficult time with that. I think there are people that can really do that easily.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of them. I struggled with it, and I had to make it mine in order to kind of do it, but it was definitely a struggle.
Well, and not all songwriting is storytelling, but yours is very much narrative storytelling. A lot of it, and a lot of metaphorical imagery and things like that. Does the fact that you're able to draw, you are able to draw, which not every songwriter can do, does that type of visualization help you figure out the song, or does it go with it sometimes, or does it come?
Yeah, I did a series of drawings in the '60s called paper listening movies, and they were kind of came out of frustration of trying to make a drawing a song and make a song a drawing, and I never quite pulled it off as far as that, but it was a real effort to somehow unite those two, and I recorded on a reel-to-reel tape. Would record the song and put it on the back, glue it in a box to the back of the drawing so people would have that music. And it wasn't illustrative. It wasn't like the song didn't illustrate the drawing or vice versa. It was like two separate two separate things with the same idea, trying to make a whole. And I think I pursued that about as much as I could with Juarez. Juarez, my first record really came out of that kind of effort, trying to do that. But I don't, a lot of times I'll be drawing and I'll get an idea for a song. Sometimes I'm playing the piano and working on a song. I'll have an idea for images. It's just, there's no rule to it. There's no pattern to it, other than, again, that I think it's like I go to my studio every day, and whether I want to or not, and a lot of times when you don't want to, you just sit there and you read or you listen to music, or sooner or later boredom kicks in and you start messing around, but I don't have any kind of really rigid pattern, other than I want to be there. Like Flannery O'Connor says it, I want to be there when it happens.
Well, this Roadrunner piece here and that song Blue Asian Red that you perform in the video, I mean, that's a great example of like two types of the same thing, two examples, visual example, and the song, so people can really experience that in the exhibition.
Yeah, I think theater, I mean, it became kind of an umbrella to be able to put everything in, because you could use images, you use music, all of it could kind of fit under that kind of idea. But I still think it's always about making the thing be about itself as best as that's your job, to make it do that as best you can, and so I don't know if this is a song or it's a story or to me it's like a memory, it's like a history or something that's triggered by those things, and that's very interesting to me, especially now. I think at my age, where I have such a pile of memories dragging behind me.
Hard to escape that as you get older. So I have a funny question, Terry. Would you say you're an optimist or a pessimist?
I think it depends on what happens when I first wake up.
I wanted to talk a little bit about like Texas, and because Texas, you grew up in Lubbock, and I'm going to show this drawing that's accompanies a very famous song of yours, Wolfman of Del Rio. And so, just what I would call Texas subject matter iconography, the myth of the West, wide open spaces, the road, flatness, light, all that stuff is very prominent in your work. And I just wondered if you want to talk about how, because you left Texas as soon as you could, I always get the sense.
Yeah.
But here we are in Texas. So.
Well, it's the Wolfman of Del Rio, and Wolfman Jack was a huge open door to the world. When I think for my generation that came up in that flat part of the world, you'd get in a car and late at night and you'd drive it fast and you'd turn up the radio as loud as it would go, and he would play music that you'd never heard before. Incredible blues from the Delta, rhythm and blues, doo-wop, all of this stuff that you didn't get from Louisiana Hayride or Grand Ole Opry or whatever. And jazz, you'd hear every once in a while he'd play some jazz. So it was, and then he would take these recordings of wolves howling and put them at different spots in the songs, and so there was an eeriness. But from the time I was, a teenager and had first car, it was that idea of motion going through space, listening to music, and those wolves howling. It was a real, it literally, I think, changed the way I thought about my life and what I thought about the world. So it's more than Texas. It's not any kind of a belt buckle kind of idea. It was something that I still appreciate, I think. I still have great appreciation for that border radio, which happened all along the Western border, California, because Wolfman Jack ended up in California at a station down there. But the radio was a huge, radio in a car was a huge open door to the world.
This drawing also brings up one of the sort of themes of something that recurs a lot in the exhibition, and that's sort of metamorphosis. And, of course, in classic mythology, people are always being transformed into animals. It's a common sort of trope to talk about human behavior. And you address that in this metamorphosis, someone turning into a wolf. And then there's several pieces that address that. The headlight woman, is it Gorilla Girl, I believe. So, I don't, you probably just do it instinctively, but it's definitely a theme running throughout this exhibition and in your work, I think, in general.
Yeah, I think, everything is something else, so, right. It's just a matter of digging in and finding, how many something else's there are, and I think it's always interesting when you find out overtly when something is not what you thought it was, and you get a perspective from behind it or above it or below it or from the side of it that you never anticipated. And that to me has always been the real interesting thing to focus on, because that's where I think things happen. I think that's where stories happen. That's where the, quote unquote, truth happens of a particular image or idea or object or whatever.
And so, that's the job of art and artists, to show us that.
Yeah, I think that's what you look for, as an artist. At least, that's what I think always is, compels me to make something, is seeing that or getting an idea or getting an inkling of it even, but that makes you want to do something. It makes you want to make something.
I'm going to take another question from a fellow musician, Amy Annell, who says she's very influenced by your songwriting and likes to perform your song, The Girl Who Danced Oklahoma, at her shows.
Yeah.
She just wondered if you could tell the backstory of that song, if you would.
I don't have any backstory. That song, it really, it came out of thinking about it's a transition thing you're talking about, but it's really about being, kind of strapped down and held by the place you're from until you can't take it anymore, and then busting loose. And in this case, she went to California, and but it's and it's also about time, the idea of time that it takes for some of those things to happen. Like on the original recording of that, there's a long period of just the same repetition of chords over and over and over and over. And then at the end of it, it says, and 10 years later in Southern California. And then the song changes, but you get a perspective of her from another vantage point. So it's filmic in that sense. It's kind of like coming from the Grapes of Wrath to Bacchanal. And but if there's no story other than, I think, those kind of feelings is where that song came from.
I wanted to ask you about sort of networks of artists and collaborators that you have, but specifically about Luis Jimenez, since we have his work prominently featured at the Blanton. We almost always have his sculpture Border Crossing up. And when we had our recent exhibition, it was interesting to walk through with you and hear you talk about him a little bit. And there's a drawing in the show. Unfortunately, I don't have an image of it, but it's kind of an homage to him. It shows like a blue sort of Texas steer. I just wondered if you could talk about him and your friendship with him a little bit, since he's also a really great Texas artist important to the Blanton.
Yeah, Luis he's one of those guys that I don't even remember meeting. It's just like I always knew him, and we spent most of our time together in airports or hotels or, in some art gathering or whatever. He and his kids a lot of times would come to gigs that I was doing. But I thought he was just an incredibly great artist. I don't know anybody that could draw like Luis, and I loved his work. And the last few times we were together, we were working on a project for the Denver airport, in which he was having a lot of difficulty with, and even told me the horse, which ends up being there. The horse was going to kill him because they kept moving it. They kept changing the place. He kept having difficulty with the airport and how that was working or wasn't working. And then literally the horse did kill him in the studio. It fell on him and killed him. But and his kids actually asked me to finish the piece, and I told them I didn't think any other human hand should ever touch it. They should just take what was there that he had finished and was working, and move it up there and let that be like a memorial to Luis. Of course, it would have been an indictment of the airport, but. And they did eventually do it, probably, I think, because of they eventually had to refabricate the piece, and it's up there. But it was, I think it probably for financial reasons that it been paid for or whatever. But I don't know. Luis was, an amazing artist, an amazing person, and he was blind in one eye.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I think a chicken picked his eye out.
Oh my God. He truly could draw like nobody else. Is amazing that way.
Yeah, he was a wonderful draftsman.
I'm going to bring up let's see. Why don't we talk about this piece? Because this tells a really interesting story that's also based in your biography, The Gorilla Girl.
Yeah, it's in the I guess it was more like in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. We used to go to Denny's on Sunset Boulevard, and a lot of artists, because it was kind of the bottomless cup of coffee, and would sit and drink coffee and talk, whatever. After we got off work or got out of our studios, we'd just stay there 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes just drinking coffee. But years later, Jo Harvey and I were in Lubbock at the South Plains Fair, and there was a tent that's with all of the banners and whatever that said, "See the Gorilla Girl." And so, how can you turn that down? So we went in to see the Gorilla Girl and sat down on folding chairs, and there was a platform with this, young woman on it with a kind of a frumpy bathing suit, and just standing there looking at the audience. And then gradually the lights changed and she kind of receded, and as she receded, hair started sprouting out of her. And the next thing you knew, there was this gorilla there, that was chained and kind of, motioning over the crowd like they were going to kill everybody. But the thing that was amazing to us is that we recognized the Gorilla Girl. When we first walked in, we said, "Wow, we know her." And we went back after the show. We went back to behind the tent and talked to her. And it was she had been a waitress at that same Denny's, and that's how we knew her. That Denny's in L.A. And her line was, I didn't mind waitressing, but when this Gorilla Girl gig came up, I couldn't turn it down.
Was she convincing as a gorilla, or was it the illusion convincing?
It was the illusion that was so convincing. I mean, it was incredibly convincing.
Really?
Yeah, it was great. It was very funky, but it was great.
That's great. What year was that roughly? You saw her?
Well, it had to be, early 80s. It was at least 20 years or more, or 10, 12 years more after the Denny stuff. So,
that's amazing you recognize her after all. That's fun.
I mean, we thought so. That's where the story came from. And the song is "The Beautiful Waitress," which has nothing to do really with
it's that song. I didn't realize that's great. It's connected to that song.
Yeah. So "The Beautiful Waitress" has nothing to do with the gorilla unless it's maybe sung from the point of view of a gorilla.
I wanted to talk a little bit about just collaboration in your work. So you collaborate frequently with your wife, Jo Harvey, and you obviously collaborate with musicians, and you write songs with people sometimes. I'm sure you don't feel like you need collaboration, but I'm sure it's also a very rich network of ideas for you. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, my collaboration with Jo Harvey, which has been the most extensive, and it's really kind of not so much that we have actually made things together as we've worked for one another. Like Jo Harvey has acted in just about everything I've written, and I've done music or sets or whatever, and helped with some of the writing of things she's done. So we kind of work for each other. The couple of times that we have actually collaborated, where it was like a living hell, So,
we've written twice,
and we've lately worked with songs together. Last 3 or so years, I never really wrote songs with anybody until kind of this pre-Moby Dick record. And we went to Marfa. We had the opportunity, a bunch of us, to songwriters, and just on kind of a fluke said, one July, let's just go and see what happens. And Joe Ely and Charlie Sexton, my son Bucka, Shannon McNally, and Jo Harvey, and then Dave Alvin ended up showing up. But we were there just to kind of see what would happen with making some songs. And I had never experienced that before. And so we've done it 3 times since then. But some songs that I used on my Moby Dick album came out of that. most of them, and then one Jo Harvey wrote in full was on that record. So it's probably the most collaborative record, other than where you collaborate with musicians. That's a whole other kind of collaboration. But as far as writing lyrics that I've encountered, and I really like it because, and most recently we wrote with John Doe, who had a great time writing last July with John and Shannon and Bucka and Charlie and I and Jo Harvey.
You frequently play with your family, and your grandsons are musicians. I just heard your grandson Calder was played on KUTX, which was really nice. So it obviously runs very deep genetically in your family, the music bug. But was it different playing with your sons and grandsons when you knew you raised them and you playing with them on stage?
I tell you, it's not like anything else. It's like when Buck and Bale and I play, it's just not like anything else. Even though I have played with most of the people that I play music with and known them for so long that they're all kind of like a family, like Charlie Sexton, and we've known Charlie since he was 12 years old.
Wow.
Haven't really played music with him that much, but he and Will, his brother, we've known since they were kids. And then like Lloyd and Richard and we've known since I did Lubbock on Everything. And so it's a long kind of relationship, and very close relationship but still having your own blood kind of playing with you and working on things. There's not anything I can't imagine, missing that, in your life. And now having Calder and Sled coming up, grandkids, and little 12-year-old crew is just killer piano player. He sits down and people expect Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Oh, wow.
He just blows them out through the wall.
That's great.
And so there's all of them are tuned to that, and that thing of making something. And I don't know, no one was ever pushed in any way that I know. They just grew up around a lot of music and a lot of art and a lot of artists and musicians, which I think had a huge impact on their life.
Clearly, and your relationships come across when you play together. It's so clear how much understanding there is. And you collaborated with your grandson on a song, right? That you played at one of your shows recently.
Well, that was his song. He and Sled wrote the song, and I really liked the song, and so wanted to do it with the whole band. So he came out and did it. Then he sang with me on the song Bloodlines, which is the title song of one of the records that's been reissued today.
Right.
But anyway, that's well, it's one of the great things about being alive for me is getting to play music with your kids.
Yeah. And take another question. Someone's asking about a specific song, Rioccino, whatever, or what a place. What happened there?
What song?
Rioccino.
Oh yeah, that's a song Will Sexton and I wrote together, and Will came to visit, and he had the chorus kind of written, and it was an incident he had read in a farmer's almanac or something, some almanac. It's a little story about a train during World War II going in Italy, going through a tunnel and breaking down in the middle of the tunnel, and the coal that they were burning in the train was bad, and everyone on the train suffocated from the coal. And so I'm sorry, that's Galleria della Armi. Rioccino is a whole. The Ticino River runs through Sesto Caliente and I forget the town across the river, but yeah, that came from playing at the Hobo Festival in Sesto quite a while ago, and the promoter. One day came and said, "I want to show you something across the river," and drove me over there. And we went to a wall, just a stone wall that had kind of these nicks and stuff in it. And he told me this story about the Germans lining up a lot of the resistance people and shooting them there. And that's kind of the idea that I kept thinking about, that image and that place. And the river itself every morning was just dense with fog, and you could barely see like little rowboats or little boats or birds or whatever. And so those images showed up in that song. But that's a Rio Ticino. I always get them mixed up. I don't know why. I guess it's because they're both in Italy and both about the war.
You're at war with your memory. That's why.
Yeah.
So another specific question: how did you first meet Lloyd Maines?
I met Lloyd when I first went to Lubbock to record Lubbock on Everything. A friend of mine named Paul Milosevic. I told Paul that I was trying to do a record, and I was wanting to do part of it in New York, part of it in LA, and then a few songs in Lubbock maybe. And he said, "Well, come to Lubbock now and do all of the songs in Lubbock, because there's a lot of great musicians here." And Joe Ely's band was there, and Lloyd was playing with Joe at that time, and Jesse Taylor was playing with Joe. And I went to a big club called Coldwater Canyon, and that's when I met Lloyd, and I found out that Lloyd worked at Caldwell Studios, who I'd call about booking time to play music, and Lloyd was kind of co-producer there. Well, not he hadn't produced really anything up until that time. But I made a deal with Caldwell, went in, and I sat down with Lloyd and Caldwell one afternoon. It was the afternoon after that Coldwater deal, and I was very hungover, and played all of the songs kind of in order, just solo for him. And then Lloyd got the band together, and we cut them, I think, about 3 or 4 days, the initial tracks, and then did overdubs and stuff. But I met him through music, and it was like a great relief to me to meet those guys, because I'd been in California and I hadn't really played music with anybody. I played totally pretty much solo on everything, and I didn't know if I was capable of playing with anybody. And when I got to Lubbock, I realized that those guys played kind of with the same kind of rhythm patterns and feelings about the spaces in the music that I did. And so it was a huge relief, and at the same time, great revelation as far as being able to have a confidence to work with people. And Lloyd was instrumental in that. And his brother Kenny played bass. There was a guy that sold cars, Curtis McBride, that played drums. And Jesse came in and played some stuff. Joe came in and played some stuff on it. And it became Lubbock on Everything. The Monterey High School marching band came in for Joe Bob. And so it was it was an amazing experience for me at that time.
Thanks. I think we have time for one more question. It's kind of a long one, but I'm going to read it out. After seeing you perform recently at the Paramount, I was half expecting some visual component to be incorporated. The numerous fans of your music out there may or may not follow your art career. You may have blended these before in the past. This is my only time I've seen you perform, but I wonder if this was a clear choice. Obviously, would be a whole lot of work to do, but perhaps there are other reasons for really bringing the visual and music together or not in the fullest sense of the word. I'm just curious if you have thoughts on this. And by the way, it was a fabulous show. So she's just sort of asking, I guess we've sort of covered this, but she's asking about bringing together a music performance, a concert, and visual elements. And you did have Jo Harvey introduce some of the songs.
Yeah. Well, and Jo Harvey, you know, we did several things from Memoirs. All of the readings were from Memoirs that Jo Harvey and I did, which are, you know, from the tapes of Memoirs. But to answer her question, other than those paper listening movies I was talking about, when I first started working on Juarez, it was such a long and kind of elaborate times that it took to doing sections of that. And I was writing songs and doing the drawings. But I did a number of presentations during that time. And I played the tapes at the same time I did a slideshow. So they were synced together. And actually when the whole piece was shown at the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston, there were two big rooms, one with all of the drawings in it, and the other room, I had there was a tape that there was a slide projector that projected images, but it was on a little sensor from the audio tape that was playing Juarez. So each time that sensor would hit, an image would change, but you heard the whole record, then it would recycle. And you saw the pieces kind of in the continuity that they were supposed to. Then you went out into the big space and you could still hear the music, but walk around and look at which were in a continuity. So, you know, I worked with that idea quite a bit. As far as, you know, stuff taking you a long time or being hard to do, that's so what? You know? Yeah, theater pieces. I mean, you do you know, there's a lot of pieces that I've done that have to do with images and being projected and live music being played and people talking, whatever, just theater. You know. But I didn't really want to do. I didn't really have any desire to project images on this. I thought it would be kind of superfluous unless you really build a show where it's one thing and not just, you know, wow, I'm going to listen to this music and look at these different things happen. That's why I like that box on that, you know, Civilization.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was enough of an image.
Well, I think we're really out of time, so I'm just going to wrap up. But I think I speak for many in saying we can't wait to see what you do next. We look forward to future shows, and I hope you're feeling good and healthy and all that. And I have to read my housekeeping, so you can put up the slide, Justin, if you want.
Well, I sure appreciate everything you guys have done.
Oh, well, thanks, Terry. It's such a pleasure working with you, really, truly. So let's see, there's, we would love it if you take a survey that's going to be in the chat. A link is in the chat. We'd love to have your feedback on this program and other aspects of the museum. You can have a chance to win a $100 gift certificate. It takes 9 minutes, so please do it if you feel like it. And then our next curated conversation on April 13th takes you behind the scenes with our current amazing exhibition on Oscar Munoz with our curator of Latin American art. The show's called Invisibilia. It's up through April 13th, or the talk's on April 13th. The show's up for a while, and the tour will be in Spanish with English subtitles because Oscar Munoz speaks Spanish better than he speaks English, and he's a Colombian artist. And then if you'd like to show your support for the Blanton, please become a member. Membership really helps drive what we can do for you in Austin, and then watch for future curated conversations. And if you've enjoyed this event, please consider making a donation. We really appreciate it, and we depend on our members and our audience support a lot for bringing our programming to you. Thanks again, Terry. Hope to see you soon.
Thank
Thanks
you,
everyone
Carolyn.
for attending, and take care. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.